This time we had a lot of questions regarding GA4 versus UA and some of the differences there. And these platforms, despite sharing the same name, are incredibly different. I once heard the analogy that Universal Analytics was like a car and GA4 is like a helicopter. Yes, they are both methods of transportation, but qualifying to drive one is not necessarily like the other. There's a lot of differences there. An analogy you'll hear us use at Inflow is one is apples, one is oranges. Yes, they're both fruit. They are serving the same need, but you can't necessarily compare them one-to-one, and there's some pretty big differences between them. Now, besides some of the visual differences, there's a lot of differences in how your data is actually collected and how it's reported on. Bigger one is UA, session-based. GA4 is event-based. There's a lot of difference in how these methods are collected that lead to different numbers. So for example, in GA4, sessions have the same idea of that they are a period of activity on your website, 30 minutes by default, unless it's changed. However, in GA4, unlike UA, sessions are not restarted at midnight, and it will not start a new session when a new campaign is encountered. So that could be a UTM parameter, someone opening up a new tab while they're in their current session on your website. UA would have started a new session there. GA4 does not. Because of this, GA4 sessions are often lower, but that is with the caveat that's assuming you are measuring the exact same items. May or may not be true in your case. Perhaps your blog was in a different analytics account and it's all in the same GA4 account, for example. That will impact those metrics there. Additionally, users is another metric that can be pretty different between them. In Universal Analytics, we were pretty used to using total users, which is what it sounds like. It was the total number of users. In GA4, however, that's defined as the total number of unique users who logged an event. GA4 actually focuses mostly on active users. And so in some of these reports, so for example, when I come in here to traffic acquisition, and you see users here, you might think that this is total users. In this case, this is actually active users. So that's something to keep in mind. If you ever need a definition of any of these metrics, go ahead and hover over them. So in this case, we can see the total number of active users. An active user is any user who has an engaged session, or when analytics collects, and I'm reading the official Google definition here, collects the first visit event or the engagement time parameter from the website, first open event or engagement time from the Android app, or the first open or user engagement event from the iOS app. But this is something to keep really careful, is a lot of people will see this and think, wow, my total number of users was 72,000. And in reality, this is actually just your active users. Another really big change between GA4 and UA was in UA, your goals or important actions that you would measure. In GA4, those are now your key events. And so what you'd think, if those are set up the same, that they would go one-to-one. That's not necessarily true. In UA, those would only fire once per session. In GA4, that limitation has been removed, although that setting can be changed. So you might need to look into your account's personalization settings. In GA4, if someone in one session, let's say, submits 2 contact forms, they have 2 different scenarios where they're reaching out for your service. So they submit 2 contact forms. UA would only count that as 1 goal, whereas GA4 will count that as 2 key events. And that's also, again, assuming that you are set up the same and you're measuring the same event. Purchases between GA4 and UA do tend to be somewhat similar. However, the way that they're set up on the website is actually pretty different. GA4 requires a lot more effort on the developer side to set up. So there can also be some slight differences there. And perhaps even if you are collecting a very similar number of purchases, perhaps the naming schema has changed in GA4 versus UA. So these are all really important things to keep in mind. Additionally, what we do as events in UA is pretty different in GA4. In GA4, everything is an event. So things you measured as an event in UA, you might set up to be a specific event in GA4. Some of these are also auto-tracked and can have some interesting definitions there as well. So when I come in here to as events, page view, for example, is an auto-collected event. View promotion, it was something that was set up in the STEM account. However, scroll is an auto-created event. I know a lot of UA accounts had this set up, but this is a GA4 auto-created event. that's just available to you already. Same thing with first visit. These events are going to be different than what you saw in UA, even if, say, you had a UA event that was measuring a 90% scroll. This number could still be a little different. Another really big change between GA4 and UA was these default channel groups. So if I come over here to UA, these are both demo accounts. You can see here 5 channels, and I am looking at May of 2023. Here we can see these 5 channels, and here in GA4, again, May of 2023, we can see 12 channels. I do think there's a couple of differences between these two properties. However, you can see that there's so many more channels definitions in GA4 than there was in UA. Really big example of this is cross-network, paid search, and then paid video, which I'm not seeing here, all generally went into paid search in UA. Again, some of these may have just gone into another channel here. They're more broken out here. Here we have organic social, we have paid social, we have organic shopping, organic video. This traffic probably still existed in UA. It just was categorized differently. So that can be a really, really big difference between the two of them. Another really big difference between GA4 and UA is going to be your attribution modeling. GA4 is nice and tricky. Some reports have different models than others. And additionally, in GA4, unless you have changed it, default is using data-driven attribution. Really good example of this. So let's say on day 1, someone clicks on a Google ad that takes them to your website. This person browses, but they do not purchase. They leave your site, go to bed, they're gone. Day 2, they do an organic search for a product you sell, and then they click on a non-ad organic result through Google. While on the site, still in that session, they open up another tab to look for, let's say, a discount, affiliate code, influencer, any sort of that. I find one, and then they click on it. And when they click on that coupon code, it loads into your site. Purchase is then completed. So you would think that in all these ways, the same channel would get credit. However, that's not actually true. In GA4, this user acquisitions report would actually credit paid search because that was the first touch. That is where the user first came from. Traffic acquisition, however, is going to be different, and that is going to credit organic search because that is your first session. And then your UA would have actually credited the coupon code or affiliate site that led you to actually make the purchase. So you can see here, there's a lot of differences in that attribution. And so they're never going to quite be as easy to look at comparing your GA4 versus your UA. Even when you think these reports might be really similar, there's always going to be those slight differences there. Now, all these differences lined up mean that GA4 and UA, while they share the same name of Google Analytics, are very, very different platforms for all they share the name. So for example, if I come in here to traffic acquisition and I see, let's say 100,000 sessions, and come in here to the UA version, there's only 80,000 sessions. Again, these demo accounts might be measuring slightly different things, even though Google tells me they're measuring the same thing. I don't have a way to verify that, but that is a really good example of GA4 and UA may not always be exactly measuring the same thing. And it's a lot deeper than just surface level users and sessions metrics that you see.